Either or was the prompt that I put up on my community tab here on the channel, and everyone came out in droves to answer this question, a lot more than I even expected, so thank you so much for that. This is going to end up being part one of a series because I got so many answers I couldn't fit them all into this video, or it might be over an hour long. But we're going to start here with like good 15 or 20 of these. And again, I want to thank you all so much for participating. If your question doesn't come up, don't take it personally. It's going to get answered eventually at some point. I try to keep them to the more broad ones just because it's a little easier to talk about without any kind of spoilers and don't want to ruin anything for anyone. But very excited about this. And some of these are tough questions and very, very hard hitting. Make sure to be checking out my community tab for all kinds of different prompts. I'm definitely going to be doing more stuff like this in the future to spark ideas for videos. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Also, I just want to make a quick announcement and let you know that Dudes Talking Manga, which is the show I do with my best friend Andrew, is actually going to be moving to its own channel. So if you are a fan of Dudes Talking Manga and the episodes that we've done here on the Fantasy Network, you're going to want to check out the channel that is linked in the description below and subscribe to that. And we'll be putting new videos on that starting this week. So all manga content is going to be over on that separate channel. I think it'll just separate the concerns a little bit and it'll work out better for everyone involved. But without any further ado, let's get into some of these doozies that you guys gave me. Now, some of these are going to have multiple questions in them. I will answer the ones that I find to be the most compelling. Sometimes I'll answer all of them. Sometimes I'll answer one or two of them. But the first one comes from Red Fury Books. Josh over there says, hard magic or soft magic, purple prose or straightforward prose, evil villain or nuanced villain. Hard magic or soft magic, I'm going to go with soft magic. I like things to be kind of left up in the air, up for interpretation. I think that if you're going to have things that, like, there has to be like guardrails, like you have to make it make sense in the context that it's given in. I think A Song of Ice and Fire does this extraordinarily well. It is obviously very, very nebulous on how exactly the blood magic works, but it does seem to work in some regard in that world. So that is a great example of something that I really enjoy. Hard magic can be great, but I definitely prefer soft magic overall. Purple prose or straightforward prose, as long as whoever's using it is using it appropriately, depends on the story, I'm cool with it. I do tend to lean a little bit more now towards purple prose for the sole fact that when you read a ton of books, it is really something special whenever you see the style of writing actually get meshed in with the story and create this, you know, beautiful product and kind of reinforce maybe some of the things that are being explored in the story. So for me, I'm going to lean more towards purple prose as long as it's not, you know, way overwritten. And then evil villain or nuanced villain, I think a good old-fashioned evil villain is so much fun. Bernard Cornwell does this extremely well. However, nuanced villains lead to a lot more discussion, I think, and gives different points of view. And I always think about it kind of in real life, like to us, you know, we're the heroes of our own stories, but to somebody else, we could be their antagonist and we don't even know it. So I think nuanced villains just leads to better stories overall and also better discussion. The Bee's Knees, love the username, can only use one for the rest of your reading. Ebook forever or audiobook forever? I've always preferred physical reading over audiobooks. I do a lot of audiobooking nowadays, but for me, it would have to be ebook. On top of the fact that with the ebook, I can highlight passages, I can make little bookmarks and notes. I know Audible has some features like that, but I just think that ebook is far superior when it comes to those features. Plus, for someone who really enjoys the writing aspect of stories, you know, there's not a way to know that McCarthy has written a 3-page run-on sentence because the narrator actually has to take a breath. But whenever you're internally reading this, you know, you can feel that intensity building as there are no punctuations for 3 pages. So it's little things like that that really bring out, you know, a very visceral reaction for me as a reader and usually makes me think a lot. So I'm going to go with ebook forever, just for the sole fact that I prefer physical reading. Sebastian Menkes, author of The Purple Prince, says, The No God or Winds of Winter. So if you're not aware, The No God, everyone knows about The Winds of Winter, but No God, it would be the final installment to The Second Apocalypse, which is R. Scott Baker's series. And he has said that he needs to write this. It's been said that it might be a duology. So I guess The No God, we're just going to say like finishing it up or getting wins. It's Winds of Winter. It's the most anticipated book ever for me personally. And The No God, while I would love to have it and I want some more work from Baker, I feel as if where we left off in The Unholy Consult was wild, but I can accept that as an ending, whereas there are some answers in Winds of Winter that would come that I would definitely need to know, maybe even answers more so than the ones that would be found in book 7 of A Song of Ice and Fire. So this one's easy, Winds of Winter. Super Gainsbros, finish reading Wheel of Time or hit your face with a hammer. Well, hitting my face with a hammer would be terrible, but I've already gotten through the slog of Wheel of Time.
What are you talking about? No, you didn't.
What do you mean, no, I didn't?
No, when you quit, you were getting to the slog.
Wait, you're saying books 1 through 6 aren't the slog?
No, you've already read some of the best books in the series.
Well, in that case, I guess it's hammer time. Maggie the Stray asks, elves or dwarves? Choose wisely. There's only one right answer. Well, I'm going to choose the one that I think is true for myself. And if this was 12-year-old me, watching Lord of the Rings, I would have said elves because Legolas was everything to me. And Rivendell, the whole thing. Elves were fascinating, and they still are. But I will say I feel like dwarves are a little bit underrepresented now, represented in fantasy. I don't see them as much. Philip Chase put them in Way of a Dan, and I loved them there. And I wish that there was not just more dwarves, but people would do more with them. I think that Shadow March by Tad Williams, I read book 1. It started off with a pretty cool, he says they're not dwarves, but like a cool concept around dwarves. So I'm going to pick dwarves as an adult now, but on any other given day, it might be elves. She Was Only Evie. Cormac McCarthy or John Williams, A Song of Ice and Fire or Malazan. Oh boy. So Cormac McCarthy and John Williams could not be more opposite in the way that they approach the writing to how to tell their stories. And I think they both do address the human condition. I think they talk about death and life and the struggles of that. And both can be very, very sad at times. I think that I'm going to pick Cormac McCarthy simply for the fact that, one, his style is a little bit more distinct, but it's actually more so the variety of his catalog, and it's so much larger than John Williams. So John Williams, I've read everything except Augustus. I didn't finish it yet. I'm only about a half way through. I put it down for the time being because I wasn't in the mood for that type of book. But McCarthy just has so many more works that I loved. With John Williams, I did like Butcher's Crossing. I think Augustus is fantastic. His debut novel, Dying in the Night, I think is what it's called, or something like that. It was okay. But Stoner is John Williams' like magnum opus for me, and that's the book that blew my mind. And John Williams has an amazing approach to writing where it is so straightforward and simple, yet he states things in such an elegant way that I would have never imagined using such plain language that you could make it so beautiful or so thoughtful. And he truly does have maybe like the perfect balance of prose, in my opinion. But Cormac McCarthy breaks all the rules, and I tend to like rule breakers. I also think that Blood Meridian and Suttree are just so good. Would I put Stoner up against those? Yes. But his other work, John Williams' other works, not so much against, No Country for Old Men, The Road, and these other things. So by a slim margin, I'm going to have to pick Cormac McCarthy based on volume. And then A Song of Ice and Fire or Malazan. I'm going to pick A Song of Ice and Fire. And I don't know if that's ever going to change at this point, because once recency bias kind of wears off of these new series that I read, I can kind of weigh them more appropriately, and I always just end up back in Westeros. Malazan is amazing. Malazan is a top 3, top 4. It's a pillar of who I am as a reader in this channel even. But for A Song of Ice and Fire, it's just when you put all the pieces together and what it does, it's my favorite. And I just don't see that changing, which is a little sad because I was on a run and I was on a chase to find the next best thing. But for me, that might just always be that unobtainable goal that everyone is trying to achieve whenever I read one of their books. With that said, Malazan is still a masterpiece in my opinion. Andrew Krause says, boxers or briefs? How about neither? David Sloan says, jiu-jitsu, weightlifting, Erickson or Martin, hard magic or soft magic, third person omniscient. Okay, so I'm going to answer just 2 of these here. And it kind of goes along with A Song of Ice and Fire and Malazan, so I'll answer this first. I think Erickson is probably a better writer than George R.R. Martin, but I think George R.R. Martin, for me, is a better storyteller. I enjoy that plot just a little bit more, so you can kind of balance those out if you want in your head. Jiu-jitsu or weightlifting? I am actually going to pick weightlifting over jiu-jitsu because weightlifting was like my first love of physical activity, and it's also one that I think I'm going to be able to do a lot longer in my life. I still plan to be hitting the gym in my 70s and 80s if I make it that long. And jiu-jitsu is good for you, and I think it's a valid skill to have, but unfortunately, it is also very, very hard on your body. When I take a couple of weeks off of jiu-jitsu, I actually end up feeling better when I'm off of jiu-jitsu. So now that I'm past that entry point, I'm going to get my black belt eventually, right? That is an amazing thing, but I would say that this back half of the journey for jiu-jitsu is more about like sticking it out, whereas weightlifting I think just has better health benefits overall. And that might be a hot take, and for all my jiu-jitsu people, I'm sorry. And then the Alan or Philip thing, I feel like everyone asked this. This was asked like 6 or 7 times. and I'm not sure if I'm going to answer it. The next one it's Mitch, and he says prose or plot, Philip or Alan. So I guess, listen, I'm going to answer the Philip or Alan question, okay? In a post-apocalyptic situation, I would definitely pick Philip, which is how I try to like rank my friends, because Philip's more active than Alan. I think that he would be able to survive a lot more. Alan has a bum pelvis now. Alan's also very combative and loud, so Alan would not go well with trying to rebuild civilization. I think that he would just butt heads with everyone and then try to be like a hipster about law. It'd be a bad matchup. But I'm gonna pick Alan over Philip for the simple fact that Philip Chase doesn't own a television and doesn't have a TV set in his house, and that just it bothers me a lot. And then prose or plot, it seems obvious that the answer would be plot, but now that I'm thinking about it, I like a lot of plot light books that have beautiful prose. But if you just give me a book full of prose, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be an all-time favorite. So I am going to pick plot, but I think prose has a lot to do with how well that plot gets across to the reader. Ivan asked, books or manga? This should come to no surprise. I would say books. I do love manga a lot, and I'm getting a more of appreciation for that. But I think there are more tropes in manga that bother me than there are in books that are like specific to anime and manga. And again, remember, I have my manga channel down in the description below. If you want to check that out, go ahead and hit subscribe. Andrew asks, GRRM, or George R. R. Martin, or Robin Hobb on Chatting with Nuts. The other can never be a guest on any show you do. This is a very difficult one. I'm going to assume that it would be an in-person interview if I could have it my way, because Robin Hobb's internet, I imagine, is terrible out on a farm in Washington, and I don't know if Gurm has one on his railroad. But I would definitely have to pick George R. R. Martin simply for the fact that I think it's just a bigger, leap in possibility. I just don't think that a lot of people get to interview Gurm anymore, and Robin Hobb would still be very far out there, but obtainable possibly for me to do that. So I would have to pick George R. R. Martin just because it seems unobtainable at this point. Joe asked, Theon or Ramsay? I mean, come on. I think it has to be Theon Greyjoy. We're talking about Theon Greyjoy and Ramsay Bolton. For me, it's easily Theon, and I actually think that Theon Greyjoy is a little bit underrepresented when people talk about the brightest spots of A Song of Ice and Fire and talk about redemption arcs. A lot of people talk about Jaime Lannister and many, many other characters, but Theon Greyjoy actually has some of the best scenes in the later books, especially... Yeah, I can't say anything without spoilers, but I think Theon Greyjoy is actually one of the best characters in all of fantasy and a little bit underappreciated when it comes to the Song of Ice and Fire fandom. Tori Talk says, a book where the villain is mid or the hero is mid? I am going to say that I feel like you could get away with a hero being mid, but if your villain is not up to snuff to shine up that good guy, that baby face, it just doesn't work. I think that a good villain can make a great hero. I don't think a great hero can make a great villain. Does that make sense? Like, if the villain is so captivating and seems like this big hurdle for the protagonist, and the protagonist can overcome that, you can come out on the other side of that, of the hero becoming something special. But you need good villains. And that doesn't mean they have to be doing the most dastardly things, but they have to be a big obstacle for people to overcome. So I think, just like in pro wrestling, in my background, that the villain kind of makes the feud and makes the match and makes the stars. They are the money makers. So I'm going to say I would much rather the hero be mid than the villain to be mid. Speaking of pro wrestling, Garrick Reed says, Stone Cold Steve Austin or Macho Man Randy Savage? I'm going to go with Stone Cold Steve Austin, but that is a razor thin margin. I'm going to go with that mainly because of the way they went about their craft. Macho Man Randy Savage was known to be very particular about literally every single detail in matches, even to how you kicked out of his pins, whereas Stone Cold Steve Austin, I think, was a little bit more of an improv worker, and I've always leaned towards that more so myself whenever I was a wrestler. So Stone Cold Steve Austin is going to get the nod from me. R. Scott Baker or Steven Erickson? So this is one of the toughest ones, because I think if we were going straight just writing style, I actually prefer R. Scott Baker's prose, just because it feels so biblical to me and has such just a weight on the page. But I have to say, I think that Erickson is a little bit more impressive because of the range. I think Erickson's humor, his everything is better than what Baker has, even though I think the metaphysical stuff that Baker is doing is untouched in pretty much anything other than Cormac McCarthy that I've read. But if I'm going with the whole package, I think Erickson just has more range. So I will give him the nod. I don't know how... It's close. It's really, really close. But I'm going to stick with my gut and say Erickson, just for being overall a more well-rounded writer, I think. Esme Rosalind says, a book that starts off great, but then ends with a dud, or a book that starts out real bad and has a banger ending. I would definitely go with a book that starts off with a little bit of a shaky start and then kills the ending, because if it's a part of a series, you now have something to get more and more excited about. But also the fact that a lot of my favorite books tend to start out like a dud to other people. But Daniel Abraham comes to mind. I love Daniel Abraham so much, but it is a hard sell to be like, hey, the first book or the intro of the book is going to be so slow that you're going to want to do anything else but read this book. But I promise you at the end of the series or at the end of the book that it's going to pay off. I would say Daniel Abraham is more across a series, not even just book one, but like you got to get to like book 3. And then it's like, oh my God, that's a hard thing to sell people on, especially nowadays when you have so many options. And I know we get tired of hearing that because I'm tired of hearing that a lot of the times too. But I would say, having a banger ending is going to probably have more of an impact on a reader than a great beginning that kind of teeters off. There's nothing worse than being apathetic by the end of a book. It's like one of the worst things a book can do for a reader. It's funny though, because I tend to actually like beginnings more than endings. The other part of this question is, would you rather always skip the first 50 pages of a book or the final 50 pages of a book? And the answer is simple. I would skip the first 50 pages, even though I love the beginnings of books. I think that knowing the end of the book, you can kind of go back and try to piece things together. But also, if you were to talk about it with other readers, I think it would be easier to fill in the gaps at the beginning of the book. And then you would actually have the context for the ending of the book. So knowing that you can go out and discuss with people, it'd be a whole lot better for them just to explain to you the first 50 pages rather than the last 50. You want to experience those for yourselves and be able to talk spoilers with people. So I would definitely always skip the first 50 pages of these books. And the last question here for part 1 of Either Or is Paul's question. He says, writer or reader? And this is a really big question I've had to ask myself, because I do enjoy writing. It's something that I would like to sit down and get better at. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of commitment, and a whole lot of time. And I don't have that time. So writing right now is a thing I do every once in a while as a hobby, and I do try to get better at, but it's not like a full steam ahead type thing, which is how I like to operate. I'm still finding stories that I love. I'm finding reasons to love reading, still to this day, even if I don't find a new favorite every time I read like I used to. So for right now, I am a reader, and I would pick a reader at this moment. And if that were ever to switch and I wanted to be a writer, then I'll go do that. But sometimes I'm a doer. I like to go and do things. But sometimes it's nice to be on the other side of that and to experience things and not be the one that's producing. Like I produce these videos, and I've produced other things in my life. And I don't know. I've always liked to go and do things myself. And I guess whenever I get to the point where I find out that the story that I want to read no longer exists or isn't out there, then I'll pick up the pen and choose writer. But for now, like the rest of you, or most of you watching, I'm a reader, and I'm a happy one. I hope this video was fun for you to watch. It was super fun for me to do, and I'll be doing like a part 2 and maybe 3 of this, and I'll definitely be putting up another prompt up on my community tab, so make sure to check that out for all kinds of updates. I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. If you liked it, think about hitting like. If you dislike, you can hit dislike. If you loved it, you can hit subscribe. I'd love to have you here. We're going to be doing more of these, more book reviews, all kinds of fun stuff. There is a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciated. Until I see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.
I want to give a big shout out to all my patrons, including my Wildlings, Knights Watching Kingsguard. My Kingsguard include Lauren Henrik, Kai, Eric B, Oscar Stewart, Stephen R, Ikaika Amanda, RJ Shaw, Nicoletta Tenner, Jennifer Garrick, Frank C, Fever, Matthias J, Sarah, Pat, Prithvi, Kevin, Ryan, Michael, Terrence, Wade, Darren, Taylor D, Derry, John C, Bass, Mitch, Sebastian, Benjamin, Joe Bot, Noel, Amanda L, Nicholas, C. Scott, Steve Talks Books, John, Chadia, Yolanda, Carlos, and Jonathan J. Thank you all so much. You're the best.